Hello, everybody. This is our third attempt of trying to record because we've sort of trying to interview my friend Ananta, and we've had to negotiate exactly what we're allowed to talk about and what we're not. And we decided to just go for it, to really be honest and go for it and talk about things that a lot of people wouldn't normally talk about. So, welcome, Ananta.
Thank you very much. Well, happy
This
to
is
be.
my friend Ananta. I've known Ananta for many years, actually. I think even maybe before my awakening, because she lived on Koh Phangan Island, and I spent a lot of time on Koh Phangan Island. And through word of mouth, actually, I heard about her, and I heard about her phenomenal story as well. Um, yeah, which is really, yeah, breathtaking. So you kind of remember. But I never actually went to see her on Koh Phangan. I think we were never there at the same time. And you also lived at the sanctuary, and I lived on the other side. Although I did spend a couple of months at the sanctuary living there, but you weren't there. But a lot of people that knew you were there. I don't know if we've ever talked about that. Like a guy
I
called
was told
Nathan.
about you when I got back. Yeah, when I got
Oh, and
back,
you
I
got
was told to be.
yeah, yeah. So that's how I know Ananta. And then we met in a women's group, a women's non-duality group, and then became friends on the side, which is very sweet. So we're just going to really go for it. So this conversation, yeah, you've been warned before the conversation. We're gonna, yeah, really go into talking about everything. So yeah, let's start with how you got into spirituality or non-duality or awakening. No holding
Okay,
back this time.
so that was the question, and we started talking about it off screen, so I'll off recording, so I'll carry on from there. So yes, actually, actually, in my 20s, I was together with a very rich man, a billionaire sheikh, actually, in my early 20s. And this was before I started searching for freedom and truth. And through that relationship, I became aware that what I was looking for was not in the material world, because he had just like absolutely everything, palace, private jets, all kinds of everything. But we had a relationship that was very deeply sexual. And at that time, in my early 20s, I was also playing around with stuff like MDMA and sex and drugs, wild and running wild. And in our relationship, I experienced with him, I would go otherworldly. I'd be like, we would have sexual journeys that went on for days, and I'd be having like orgasms that last for days. And in those spaces, I was experiencing the whole cosmos, in which I disappeared, and that, as the whole of life, was orgasming as me. And at that time, I can say that I didn't have these words, because I didn't know what was happening, and I just imagined it was the drug. Like a lot of people do, they imagine it's the drug, and then they want the drug again, and they keep going for the drug. But it wasn't the drug. The drug was to reveal to me something not of this world. And that opened the door to experiencing, I would say now, using my words now, life as it truly is. However, in those moments, it was the whole cosmos orgasming. And how that relates to true reality now is something I can speak about, and I couldn't then. Anyway, our relationship split off. I couldn't stay in that world, and I started going for freedom, and I went off to Thailand to heal from the drug scene. And I was in Thailand, and I realized that I wasn't going back. I was never going back. And yeah, there's a lot of ways that I could go with this because it's such a multifaceted story. But to bring it to the point, I, from that moment on, when I started to have boyfriends, normal boyfriends and love affairs, and when it came to normal sexual relationships, I couldn't feel anything. So I started to really wonder if there was something wrong with me, because in normal relationship with normal boyfriends, it's like I just couldn't feel anything. So I was relating to the experience that I was having with my Saudi Arabian partner, which went on for years, and I couldn't explain what was happening in that, but I wanted that. I didn't have a name for it, I didn't have words for it, but I wanted that. And then I knew there was something in me I had to understand. I knew there was a low-grade depression, that even though I was free, like living a free life, working in Japan, traveling from all around Asia, stepped out of the system dropped out of the system, just living free, there was still something that was underlying everything else, that was something that I needed to understand about myself, like something that was, I would say, using words now, today, looking back, a low-grade depression, and I didn't understand what it was or where it came from. So anyway, one day I was in conversation with a girl I knew who was also working in Japan, and she said, "Oh, bye, I'm off now to Asia, I'm off to India. I'm going to this ashram where you go there and you shout and scream and you do all these meditations and you go absolutely, like you can just like go absolutely wild, and then you go in silence, and I'm going to be with my guru." And I was like, "What? What's that?" And she said, "Oh, here." And she handed me a book. And this book was called Tantra, Spirituality and Sex.
Oh, wow. Out of all the books that he's written.
Yeah. And I didn't have a clue what Tantra, I mean, I got cold shivers right now, because now, obviously Tantra is... So I just looked at this book, and it was Osho, Rajneesh, Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh on the book. I just looked at this tiny little book, and I was like, oh, wow, spirituality and sex, what's that? So I started reading it, and from the very first page, oh my God, literally, oh my God. He was speaking exactly what I was knowing inside. He was describing those experiences that I was having in drugs and sex, in sex and drugs. And he was describing the experiencing of the whole cosmos as the cosmic orgasm. Mm. And as I was reading it, I was just like, It's called something. It's called something. Oh my God, there's a name for it. It's called tantra. And I start turning the pages, and everything I read was just like, I was just in there. And at some point in the book, he said, if you are one of my sannyasins, if you find me and you are reading this book, or words to that effect, I'm calling you, you're being called, I'm calling you back, we've met before, da 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 da. And I was just turning the pages, going, like my heart was beating really fast. There was like the depth of me was just all knowing, all recognizing, going, this is it. And a movement in me to, I've got to go there. I've just got to go there. And so this just exploded my consciousness. It blew my mind. It exploded my consciousness open to recognize and realize that there's something that I am here to know and to realize and to find, and whatever it is, this is it. And it's ringing that bell in my depth, and I have to go.
What year was that you went to? He was still alive?
Well, he was still alive, and I packed my bags. I got everything together. I started, and I was just like, you know, because on the island it was all a bit wild, and there were all these wild parties, and lots of people were doing LSD, and I was also doing LSD, and these wild parties, and people were just like having these like cosmic moments, and I was like, I've got to go to India. I'm going. I told a couple of people who already knew about him, and I started packing my bags, and I'm just on my way to go. And then I got the news that in that moment he just left his body.
Oh.
So I was on my way to Bangkok. My flight was booked, everything, and I got the news that he just left his body. However, it was like I had connected with something, his being, whatever, and it didn't matter about his body, because where I'd connected to him, his body, his being, his consciousness, wasn't even in the body. So the connection was so alive that it really didn't matter if his body was there or not, you know?
Yeah,
But
I just got goosebumps all over me when you're talking about
yeah, I have too.
but just to say to everyone that we're talking about Osho, because I don't know if we actually mentioned his name.
Osho, yeah.
Yeah, Osho.
I said Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, which was his name before he changed it to Osho.
Osho, yeah.
So anyway, but then I was aware that there would be thousands and thousands of people celebrating and burning his body, and it would be wild to go there right now in that moment. So I decided it happened that I diverted the trip and went instead to, I went to Nepal, Kathmandu, and straight into, no, I walked first in the mountains, and then I went into a 10-day Vipassana retreat. Silent.
Had you meditated before?
No.
Wow, that's quite a starting place.
No, it was as if once I'd connected with this energy, and his message just opened, and I just knew that the parties were not it, that the thing was not it, that wasn't what I was looking for, and I just went. And I went alone, and I actually walked for 3 months in the Himalayas alone, with 16 kilos on my back, high in the mountains, in silence, alone. I just didn't want anyone around me. Wow. And at the end of the 3 months, I went into the 10-day Mahayana Buddhism, actually. Mahayana is tantric, right? Yeah. I didn't put all that together at that time. But so then in there, I had the first satori, where the mind completely stopped. And you know. Yeah, so that was the beginning. That was the beginning of the journey.
Wow. I didn't ever hear all this before. And you had the confidence to walk all that way, as a white female, young female, beautiful
Yeah, it
young
was
female.
wild. It was wild because I was actually like, you could have a guide, you could have someone carrying your bag, you could have done that. And I was like, no, I don't want to listen to people. I don't want to listen to any of it, No, just silence, just the mountain, and I was, I was on this track. I was really full on actually. I was 27 then. 26, 27, yeah.
And where would you sleep at night?
In these little, you'd have these little, I don't know what they're called.
Rest houses?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And then I'd meet others who are walking on. I'd meet another person who doing another track and have these like really full on, totally spiritual conversation, and then be gone and never see them again. But it was just like my eyes were like, it was just I was flying, but I still had this sense of an underlying depression,
Yeah.
right? That I knew I had to resolve. So that drove the search. Right? So then I went for the 10-day retreat. I had this like the first satori where the mind stops, but I still didn't recognize, like when the mind completely stops and what is here is eternity, eternal truth is here, but I didn't recognize myself as that. There was nobody to point that out, and there was no, of course, I mean, in the Buddhism, they're speaking it, they're pointing to it, but no, it was something that I was experiencing, but it was an experience that came and went. So following that, the following season, I went to Pune, to the ashram, to Osho ashram. And I went into everything, absolutely everything. I stayed in silence for 3 months and discovered, explored all the deconditioning of primal deconditioning. And then I went into, there was an intensive there called Who Is In. And in that, it's a long thing to talk about. I don't want to, if I go there, it might take up a lot of time. But that basically it's called an enlightenment intensive, where you are exploring the question of who is in right now. And you need to name every thought that you can see. And at the end of that is 5 days intensive, from 5 a.m. till midnight. You're being asked the same question, tell me who is in. So, non-stop, you're sitting in front of somebody asking the question, and for 5 minutes you have to repeat every thought you see. So after 5 days of that, again, I had this complete stopping of the mind and this seeing, this absolute clear seeing. So when people ask, like, tell me who is in, when the guy opposite asked, tell me who is in, I was like, this is where I was going on LSD. This is what I thought LSD was. It's not, it's expanded awareness. So I started to recognize that what I was experiencing in those glimpses, in those moments on a psychedelic, was actually always here and available. So this was the beginning of the journey. So do you want to, maybe you want to take me in whatever direction now?
Um, yeah, just being a bit blissed out by it, actually. Yeah. I mean, there's just so much that we could talk about, like,
So much.
like the fact that you're experiencing it in sexuality and then in drugs and um yeah, and then
I
with
think a lot
this,
of people do. I think
yeah,
a lot do, but they don't they think it's the drugs or the sex.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And the first time I took LSD, I was I had already was already on the path and took it for spiritual reasons, and was just like recognizing it straight away, like this was what I was looking for.
Right.
Yeah. Um.
Yeah, I was 18 when I first took LSD.
Yeah. It's yeah. So I think you should just carry on with your story. So what happens after that, rather than me
Oh,
just
what happens after
direct.
that? So, yeah, and then so I was going to Japan and working for 3 months, making enough money to be free for the rest of the year. So then I'd go back to Thailand and play for a few months. And then I'd go back to India and study. You know, I started learning how to massage and trauma release and all this kind of stuff in Pune. So I was doing this kind of circuit. And my billionaire boyfriend, we were still very much in contact because there was a great love. There really was a great love. And we were still, it was faxes in those days. There was no email, no internet. You know, we're going back.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah. The only way that I would hear from him was through a fax. And so he called me to Egypt. He used to fly me to come and see him, and I went to see him. I was by this time I was almost turning 30, and I went to see him in Egypt, and I could see that his body was starting to fade, and he asked me to marry him, and I was like, like, hang on a minute, you know, I'm living such a free life, and I love this freedom, and I'm not giving it up for anything. And at the same moment, I could see that it really meant a lot to him. That it was really. Anyway, I said I'll think about it. I said I'll come. I'll think about it. Give me some time. So it actually took me, I don't know, maybe 6 months, and I was going backwards and forwards with this idea, and then we were always in contact. And actually, it was 3 days before I took sannyas, right? I took the name Ananta. So for anybody who might be listening who doesn't know what sannyas is, it's a moment where there's a huge celebration of the life you lived up until this moment, and you completely surrender the past, who you were, with your name and everything, and you get a new name, and it's an initiation of about 500 people all singing and playing amazing music, totally amazing, totally blissful. There's this big, big, big celebration, and you get the new name, and then you're committed to a spiritual life or living into the meaning of that name. So 3 days before I was about to take sannyas, I had a phone call with my partner. His name was Isam. And I said that I could do this marriage if I could have 6 months of the year in his world and 6 months in mine. And he agreed. And so this was in the February, and we agreed, and I was going to come back to England in April, and we were going to have horse and cart marriage and all this thing. And I'd have my home in Thailand, and then I'd go in and out of his life. And I was really, yes, it was like, we had this beautiful phone call. And I went on the Saturday evening and took sannyas, had this whole, I have to say, it was like the most incredible night of the life. Like, never is like so high, like Shakti explosion. It was the most incredible moment ever. And I got this new name, and it really is like the end of me, the end of whoever I took myself to be, and taking on this new name. And that night, while I was taking sannyas, my partner left his body. And in the morning, I went to the post office and I received a fax telling me that he was gone.
Yeah.
So it was in the middle of the highest expansion of consciousness. I then received this impact of this shock. The shock was so great because for those who might be watching this and don't know who Osho is, Osho was a guru, and he was dressed in robes, and my ex-partner, when he went to Saudi Arabia, wore robes, and it was like I had married Osho that night instead, and my partner had left with my life before. So there was absolutely nothing left of who I was before that moment. Everything went with it. So I was in a state of shock. And
did you ever find out what he died from?
Yeah, I mean, it boils down to being drug induced. But basically, he was sitting in the bed at night and his head was like this, and he couldn't lift his neck up, and the breath couldn't, you know. But because the combination of what I was in and this great shock, then that completely stopped the mind. I could not find a thought for a month. Literally. I couldn't. I was in this absolute, couldn't find a thought. And if I would find a thought, it was a hell realm. Because it would have been a thought like, oh no, where has he gone? Blah, blah, blah. It would have been that. And any time I would come near a thought, it was a hell realm. So I stayed. And where I stayed was in this open, wide open, where I was receiving all kinds of downloads and knowings or whatever. Yeah, it was really wild. Anyway, following that, after that, it meant that I had to go back to Japan and work again, because obviously if I was going to marry him, I didn't need to do that. And so now I had to go, I was in I would say a virginal state. Virginal, like so pure. I'd done all this deconditioning, I'd wiped out all these, like, all this. I was in such a purity, such a, yeah, it was just light. It was just in this pure, innocent light, beauty, 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 godliness. And then the realization that I had to now go back to Japan, because it was the way I knew how to survive, meant that I had to step into a whole different energy. And it was an energy of my past that I knew I'm not that. But it meant I had to step back into that out of survival. And I said, okay, one last time. It took me a few months, because first I went to Thailand, spent a few months partying and stuff. One last time. And of course, you know the next bit.
Yeah.
It was one last time. I went back to Japan, and through a series of circumstantial events, this led to me getting arrested and sentenced to 3.5 years in a Japanese prison.
Yeah. My God. What a story, Ananta. I didn't know all the stuff before.
So now you know why I woke up there. You
My
know,
goodness, yeah.
it wasn't just like I went to prison and woke up. It was, all of that came before. So
Yeah.
when I went into that situation, I already had just taken on the name Ananta. I had already, 18 months before actually, I had already like taken on a spiritual commitment. I had already surrendered absolutely to the truth above all else. I was already absolutely, totally bowing down. And I want to make a point of this, because at that time, in it's 32 years ago. So at that time, my understanding when I went in there was a bit different than it is now. And it's like I had bowed down to the feet of Osho. However, it wasn't that I'd bowed down to a guru. I had bowed down and surrendered to what I recognized that was coming through him. So every word that was coming through him and the transmission that was coming through him was recognized by the truth here as the truth, without any separation. So the truth was recognized, and like a ringing bell, it was waking that up in me. So the bowing down of the egoic level, the little me, to the guru, was a necessary aspect of the merging or the marriage of my being. You know, I couldn't have put these words then. I can put these words now. At that time, it was totally, I was surrendered to the guru. But what is the guru? The guru is the Satguru that we all have inside. Every single one has inside the Satguru, the voice of truth. That which only speaks truth, that which only transmits truth, is the Satguru, the truth guru. So there is no other in existence than that truth itself. There is no other. Only that speaks. Only that transmits. Only that is. So the recognizing that coming through him was because it was coming alive here. That's the truth. But when anybody is seeing, like when people listen to you, Lisa, and they know that the truth is being spoken, it's because the truth inside of them is recognizing that. right? So it's exactly like that. And I was totally surrendered to that in the form of Osho. And so when I got sentenced after 5 months on trial, and it was, by the way, involvement with LSD, when I got sentenced, the only thing I had no more visits for the next few years. I had I was solitary confined, so I had no conversation ever again after the sentencing. And I was in a cell with 25 kilos of Osho books. You thought I was going to say cocaine for a moment.
You were allowed Osho books, like 25 kilos of Osho books?
25 kilos, but a good friend, went and bought those books and gave them for my journey. But you can't have 25 kilos of books in the cell. You get two at a time. So I could have two at a time, and that's the only relationship I had. It's the only input I had. I couldn't have letters from friends. I couldn't have visits. So
You weren't
that's
allowed visits or anything?
no, only from the British Embassy every 3 months.
Wow.
Once I was sentenced, there were no visits.
So you
So
didn't speak to your family for 3 years?
no,
Could you
it's
write
just
to them?
one letter to my mum. Yeah,
You were allowed that, do
yeah,
that?
yeah. The lights
Oh.
going a bit strange here. So yeah, that was so the whole setup, let's say, the whole scene that was kind of set up was I was solitary confined, so I had no conversation with anybody else. I had Osho, who I was totally surrendered to. It took me about 7 or 8 months to get permission to get a photo of him in my room. You know, it was about that big, like his eyes just. And I had his books, and I had to work in a factory, work like a dog, forced labor. So it wasn't just like I was just sitting in there reading my books all day, blissing out. No, I was like, it was very severe and very, very strict. So
How many hours of labor did you have to do a day?
from 7 in the morning
Oh,
to about five to come home from work. You get taken to the factory and brought back to the cell. And you're
7
not
days a
allowed to
week.
talk. Yeah, no, 5 days a week. You're not allowed to talk. It was 50 people in a factory, all in silence, working on machines.
Wow.
And you're getting
I'm
screamed
sure
at.
there was, oh, right. But I'm sure there was some communication, but just not in words.
Communication was like somebody who would bring you the work and tell you how to do it, but there would be a guard standing there watching that there's no other conversation happening.
Wow.
So you're being watched like 24/7. 24/7 you're being watched. And there are like 500 rules, and the first rule is never break a rule. Because if you break a rule, you're going to sit for 21 days on your knees as an apology.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And the thing is the rules are all in Japanese. So you don't even know what the rules are until you break them.
Oh, they didn't give you any translation.
No, no, you're not special.
Oh, wow.
You cannot be special.
Yeah. That's
So
intense. How many times did you break the rules?
constantly to learn what they were, and the first time you break it, that's okay. But once they know you're aware of the rule and you break it, that's rules are like you can't lean back against the wall. So you got to sit in your cell on the floor because there's no chairs, right? You got to sit on the floor, and you can't lean back on the thing until a certain time in the night when you can lay down. And you've just come home from the factory where you've been working all day on the machine. You can't lean against the wall, so you are literally exhausted, tired, in pain, and you've got to sit. And so, but there's amazing things that were developed in that space, really. I mean, I could tell you, but I don't know how much time we've got. I could tell you.
Yeah, we still got time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as an example, right? So, so you're not allowed to lean back against the wall, but there is something in all of us that, well, first of all, the ego wants to survive, and there's something in all of us that wants to survive, right? So there was this intense play of the awareness in the guards and the awareness in the prisoners. So the awareness in the guards, they want to catch you breaking a rule, so they're all the time. And the awareness in the prisoners, they're waiting until the moment the guard is looking the other way that they can break the rule. Right? So you've got this intensity of awareness with itself. You get what I mean? You get the picture of, like, you know, like your dog who's like waiting to make the move. So it was like all the prisoners are really fully present, waiting for the moment when all the guards are looking the other way, and then they can whisper something, for example. Right? And the guards are waiting for the moment they catch you, they scream. Right? So this intensity was there constant, you understand? So you're living in a constant intensity of awareness present, right? So one of the things is, in the cell you can't lean back, so desperately want to lean back, very, very tired, in pain. So you come to learn their footsteps. So you can hear where their footsteps are and how far away they are. So when you can hear how far away their footsteps are, you can lay down and totally surrender into a deep, deep, deep drop. And through their footsteps, like you can surrender so deep and let go into like, but you've got to keep another side of awareness expanded and present to their footsteps, yeah? So you've got this expansion and depth going on at the same moment. And their footsteps come up and then you sit back up like nothing happened. So you've got this thing going on all the time. And what I can say now is that the exercise of these states of awareness is very much present in the way that I work with people now. So, for example, like there'll be a room full of people in retreats, for example, and I'm working like intensively with one, and at the same time I'm aware of every movement in everybody else all at the same time. Because it's been developed to expand and to focus, and you know, we all have all of these abilities, but if they're not developed, they go to sleep, right? So I would say that in that situation, I was primed for the work that we do, because the exercises of the states of awareness were developed. You get what I mean? And the ability to, like I was communicating with someone 10 cells away, you know, through dream states and stuff. And well, I know her because I knew her. She was the one who gave me the 25 kilos of books. She got arrested a year later and put in the cell 10 cells away. And we weren't allowed to talk, but we were communicating.
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah, that's the story.
Wow. And what was the awakening that you had when you were in the prison?
So, I would say there was extreme suffering. for a long time, you know, like the physical, the mental, the emotional. It was extreme, like really extreme. You're getting screamed at constantly, and the body's in shock constantly. And exhaustion, I never slept. I didn't sleep. I used to just go lucid dreaming. I never slept. So in this thoroughly exhausted and emotionally drained and all of that, because one of the things is you don't get told when you're getting out of there. There's no date. So that can drive the mind crazy, because you're always looking at the calendar and trying to work out and understand when other people get out, how that might work for you. So the mind is going constant. It was a hell realm. While at the same time, I'd read like one page of Osho every evening when I came back from the cell. So I'd be reading it and staring into his eyes and realizing it. So it would be opening, and I'd be sitting there like pure seeing. And at the same time, I had all this suffering going on. So both experiences were very, very present. And then one evening, I was so exhausted. So I was just exhausted with even trying to figure out when I'm going to get out of there. It was just like, reached the point of, can't fight it anymore. And when they gave because it's like a bell that comes in your room, like ding, 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 that you can now lay down. When that signal came, I laid down and I just dropped. And dropped. And dropped. It was like I had no choice, the exhaustion. So I like to say it like this. It was like I started to just drop and drop into the pain, because the pain was excruciating all through my body. It was so much pain, and I just started to, I couldn't resist it. I dropped into it, and I was experiencing it fully, and then I would breathe, and it would drop deeper, because I knew this way because I was in body work before, and cranial sacral and whatever. So this was happening. I dropped into the pain, and I wasn't searching anything in that moment. I wasn't looking for anything. It just kept dropping, and then it opening and dropping and opening. So I was dropping, experiencing the pain, breathing into it, and it was opening, and then it would drop. And then a certain moment, it was as if I dropped right through the layer of where pain lives. And as I dropped through it, I opened into the space where there is no body. There's no more a body. So there's no more pain. And when I dropped into this, and this opened and opened and opened and opened and kept opening and opening and opening and opening, there was light. And one thought came. It was like there was no more jail. There was no more story of jail. There was only freedom. I knew I was free. And there was one thought. What is this? And when this thought came, it opened and opened more and more and more. And it was like I was bathing in pure, all-encompassing, whatever you want to call it, light, freedom, love, peace, endless, endless, vast space. I still didn't realize this is what I am. However, I knew I was free. And so I spent the whole night and the next morning, when I woke up, I didn't sleep, whatever. Next morning, when they called to like get up and stand to attention, and you know, you have to come out of the cell and stand, and there's a whole row of you, and you have to be counted and turn your head and say the number, like each knee, san, chi. And in this, the next morning when this happened, I was just like, I did all the actions, turn my head, count the number, but I was just like, there was this deep, deep, deep smile inside. And instead of the mind running with, when am I get out of here, when am I get out of here, I don't want to go to work, I just turned like that, and there was the sun coming up over the mountain. Oh no, there's someone knocking on the door. The sun was coming up over the mountain, and I turned back, and there was just only this moment. And from that moment on, there was no more struggle. There was still pain, there was still all of the body conditions, there was still all of that, yet there was no more fight with the experience. It was only this moment. And from that moment on, I knew I was free. And every night that I'd come back to the cell, I couldn't wait to lie down and go there. Mm. And every night, that's where I went. And everything changed in the world. Everything changed. Absolutely everything. Mm. I'd sit and look in Osho's eyes, and I was just traveling in eternity. And looking out of the window was just only this beautiful, beautiful moment. There was bliss, there was light. And I started to, when the guards started screaming and shouting and telling us off, I just found it really funny. Deeply inside, I was looking at them going, they're in jail. You know, I actually said to one guard who came like to tell me off through the window of the cell, da, 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 I actually said, you, me, I. You know, that's a whole nother story, but it was like I saw that they were in prison, that they were the prisoners. Yeah. You know, and so this was I had 9 more months in there. And for the next 9 months, I was just only the moment was. It didn't matter when I'd get out. It didn't matter, you know. So it was absolutely wonderful, and there's so many avenues that I could go from within that time. and the shock of getting the news of getting out and all of that, you know, it was just each part of it is a whole nother story of, you know, it became absolutely magical. And I knew that I was being made, I was being prepared for the message, the sharing of truth, because it wasn't, you know, it wasn't until actually later that I realized that I am, you know, I was awake, yet there was another whole nother level to that when like the separation between I and truth. It was like I was knowing that, I was seeing that, I was recognizing that, until later a moment came where that fell away. There was no separation between what truth is and what, you know. So, I mean, it wasn't just one moment that, and yet it was, it only ever is. Yet it's it was an ongoing illumination, and I would say it still is an ever deepening revelation of what that is, right?
Yeah. Yeah. My goodness, your story is so captivating, and
Oh God, I've started to feel aware that I might be taking way too long, and we might, you know,
no,
time might be.
no, it's like I'm absolutely blissed out and captivated. Yeah. Like I'm so in you and in the experience. Yeah, it's really beautiful. I feel that we should maybe end soon, but have another conversation
Yeah, let's
because
do
it's so
that.
that there's so much more like we could go into. Like I would really love to go into the tantra stuff and what happened in the tantra stuff. But
Ooh.
I would love to speak more about like the deepening of this experience,
Yeah,
and then
let's.
also just other questions like you were so brave, you know, when you did all this stuff, like to you really lived at
Well,
the edge of life.
I was always living on the edge. That's true, but I was so scared when I arrived in that jail. Really, I mean, yes, brave, but I was also so scared when I arrived there, because there, I mean, I was the only Westerner, and it was horrific. When I arrived there and I saw what was going to be the next few years, it was horrific.
Mm.
The scenes were just like, no, this can't be true, you know.
Yeah,
But again, I could go in that, and it would take another 20 minutes and another 20. So
yeah,
maybe we should do this in sections, and maybe we could also invite people to, if they have questions for us to
yeah,
address on the next.
yeah. That would be really beautiful because it's just really amazing story and your bravery, you know, to do all these things and to really go for it, to really put
Wow.
yourself out there and to really um like at all, you know, like at all costs. No, is that the right word? Like at all, like you did it.
I really had that more so when I was younger. Like I was just, I just kind of knew that life was for so much more, and I was living on the edge all the time. Like,
Mm,
you know, I've got to live this to. I was just really, really going for it. That I didn't have fear, you know. So yeah, it was very much just who I was, and I didn't even associate that. I didn't know any different, you know.
mm, mm. Yeah, it's an amazing story. But yeah, so maybe we wrap that up now. Um, yeah, and we will do part two, part three, and questions and answers. I
Okay,
feel like
that'd be
there's so
great.
much
Yeah, I'd
more.
love
Yeah,
to. I'd love to.
we could do. I just love it. Like your story and the way that you tell it is so captivating, and the energy in which you speak about it is really
Oh,
divine.
Lisa, I really appreciate you because you know you're so lovely and open. Really, I really feel that, and you know, not everybody would even be that interested.
I think so many people, Ananta, your story is gripping, I think. Yeah. Okay, but we end this now, and I promise everyone a part two and a part three. And yeah, thank you so much, Ananta, for sharing with us today.
Oh, thank you,
Yeah.
really, from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Yeah.